All right, students, excuse me. Hello and welcome back. Happy Friday. I'm happy to pass along real quick before we get into today's lesson that hopefully my baby girl is home by the weekend. So thank you for the prayers. Keep praying though for speedy recovery for her and for my wife as well, who again is still recovering from an infection. Today, hopefully by now, you have turned in your syllabus and had that signed. If not, you know the policy on that. I don't accept late work, but if you've reached out ahead of time to myself, Mr. Johnson, then you can certainly turn that in next time, and we'll just count off 10% per day. Also, hopefully you had a chance to look at the books that we're going to be able to choose from for our silent reading. Again, we'll have that at the start of class early in the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. We plan on going to the chapel every week as, of course, our schedule permits. All right. Today, I've done the unthinkable. In my old school ways, I despise PowerPoint. It might be the thing that I despise the most in this life. I don't know. I hate sin, but that's kind of a spiritual, supernatural thing. But PowerPoint might be sinful. I don't know. I could find some moral theology way of proving that, but I don't like PowerPoint. It's difficult. My relationship with PowerPoint is very strained. But for the sake of all of you, so that you don't have to stare at my big ugly face the entire time while listening to this video, I created a PowerPoint slide for you. So that's how much I care. All right, let's go ahead and pull this up, and I'll give you an overview of what we're talking about today. What you need for me while I'm getting the PowerPoint pulled up is get out something to take notes with. By something, I mean like a notebook or a piece of paper. I would highly suggest designating just a notebook for this class, or if you've got one of those fancy schmancy 5-subject notebooks, just make one of the sections for this class. We will always take notes by hand because that's just scientifically proven literally to be a more effective way of retaining information, and it eliminates distractions. So be that what it may, and however you feel about that, I definitely respect, but I'm not going to change my mind on. So make sure that you've got something. So go ahead, if we need a second, just grab something real quick to write some notes on, and something to write with as well. So we're kind of starting out. I don't want to scare any of you and think that I'm one of those teachers who wants to just treat the first couple of weeks of school like it's the middle of the semester and you're getting bombarded with assignments. But I need to keep you busy with something in my absence so that we're still making some progress until I get back. So that's kind of the reason. So this isn't normally like day 2 stuff. I don't want to scare anybody and make it seem like we're going really fast. But that's just kind of the nature of how I'm approaching this while I'm out. I'll talk through a little bit too. I try to set up the slides in a way that mirrors the way that I write notes on the board normally. So that might be something that we talk about real quick, just to make sure that you stay organized. Anyways, today what we want to do is accomplish a couple of things. We want to first talk about a little bit of review of what theology is, why it even matters. I understand we may have some new students to the school for whom this is the first time you've ever taken a theology class. I understand that we may have students that are not Catholic, that are not Christian. Maybe your only experience has been a semester, or maybe you're here all last year. Maybe you're a credo Catholic. I don't know. We come from all different backgrounds. We need to just kind of broadly talk about at the start of this school year what theology is, why it matters. The second thing that we're going to talk about is obviously the nature of God. Last class, when I was going over a little bit of what the course this semester is going to be about, I used the analogy of a divine romance. And maybe you thought that was a little bit weird to equate theology and our relationship with God with something romantic. I think the analogy works because for anybody that maybe not even has been in a romantic relationship, but has seen, although our society does a really poor job of portraying true romance, but has seen any evidence of what goes into a romantic relationship, it actually mirrors very well the plan of salvation history and how God has redeemed all of us from sin, from the fall of Adam and Eve, which we'll talk about probably next week, from all these things. And what continues to go into a relationship like that is also very close to what we see in any romance. So that's what we want to discuss today. So I've got a few goals for us. One is to do just that, to recap what theology is, why it matters. Secondly, if we're examining salvation history through the lens of this divine romance, if you will, we need to know who's involved. Okay. Maybe you've been a part of a theater class. Maybe you've been a part of a play before. Maybe you've been to a play before. You know that in the playbill that you get, it basically just, the pamphlet that they hand out to you at a performance. One of the first things that you see is the list of all the parts. So the parts of the characters in the play and who they're being played by. And there might even be a little bit of a description or a background. Oftentimes that's the case in Shakespearean plays or something, is you get some further information about who the characters are in the play. Well, in this cosmic play, in this divine drama, we need to first understand the most important player, which is God. And that's what we're going to be spending some time doing here today for just a little bit. And I'm going to send you away with something very easy, very light over the weekend if you don't get it finished today, which you probably will if you work well. That will basically kind of get your mind jump-started into this thought process as well. And so that's the third thing, is form a response to the prompt, who is God? And that's what you'll be doing once we're finished with our lesson today. All right, so if you're taking notes, which hopefully everyone is, you see the letter A in the top. You're gonna have to bear with me, the noise in the background. It is the cat's witching hour. If you have cats, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Quick sidebar before we talk about theology, because I know maybe some of you are interested in knowing some things about me. I'm just this mysterious guy behind the camera at this point. And I'm running laundry, so there's the tune of the washer that's telling me it's finished. I'm not necessarily a cat guy. We got these cats from my parents, whose barn cats had a litter, and originally it was, well, we'll take one, and then there were 4 of them. One went to my brother, one went to my sister, and there were 2 left over. And so my wife was like, oh, we'll take them both. And so here we are. Normally we have a dog, a collie named Moses, who is very, very large for a collie. He's nearly 100 pounds. He's not at the house right now since we're at the hospital. We have a relative watching him. And we have kind of a hobby farm, even though we live here in town, in a rural town on the west side of Indy. We have 12 chickens right now and 2 ducks. We have a decent sized garden. We have compost bin and all sorts of good things going. So just an aside. So when the cats are climbing up the walls here in a second, I just wanted to go ahead and apologize for all that chaos. All right, so when you're taking your notes, this is how I write them on the board. You've got the letter A, that's kind of your subject line, your header, and then from there, just the ones. I usually use dashes, but there's A's and B's and lowercase Roman numerals, I guess, or something. So just kind of think about that. You may want to just copy the same format. All right, so I want to start by going over the concept of what theology is. Okay. It's funny for us to think about it this way, but theology is actually a science. Most of the time, we think of science as something that Mrs. O'Connor does, that Mr. Riley does, that Dr. Sperry does. And that's true. We do have a science department at Ritter. We have, of course, many years by this point of science classes that we've taken throughout grade school, middle school, and now in high school. And there's people that are scientists, for heaven's sake, right, out in society. But we have to understand that the word as it's used today in English is really not the classic way that that word has been used. Really, science is just a body of knowledge that has a clear methodology. It has a set pattern that it uses to be able to arrive at truths. And in the case of theology, there is actually a set methodology that people that are known as theologians use to arrive at truths. The truths that they're arriving at are, of course, different from that of another science. So, for example, go talk to Mr. Kavanaugh, Mr. Kaufman. History has its own methodology that it uses to arrive at historical truths. We can take a look at perhaps the mathematics. I was thinking of the math department. Some of us know all too well, actually. If you're like me, you don't know a whole lot about the methodology of mathematics, but you know that there is a method that it follows to arrive at what type of truth? Mathematical truths about the world, numbers, abstract ideas, and that nature. So theology is on the same playing field, essentially, as any other body of knowledge. But in fact, as I put at the bottom, it's actually going to be the most important science. So we kind of get that bragging right as theology teachers. The object of theology is twofold. Primarily, it's God. And by the object, I mean, think about grammar for a second. The object of the sentence. It's the thing receiving the action. So the action is the search, the inquiry, the methodology that's being applied. To what or whom? To God. Okay, so that we can attain truths about who God is. Secondly, it's all the created things that exist in relation to God. As we're going to find out, that's really the only concrete way that we have as human beings of understanding truths about who God is, outside of those which he has directly revealed to us. Is we can only come to know God through his creation because that is our experience. If that sounds confusing, that's okay. We'll talk about it and break it down a little bit more later. I added this second thing here. Why study theology anyways? Okay, why would theology even be important? For a lot of us, especially in our world today, maybe we have a tendency to kind of want to write off theology or religion as things that aren't very important. Certainly our culture seems to diminish the value of these things. And without getting into the politics of it, that's really not very surprising. We live in a culture that is increasingly hostile toward people of faith, and that sees faith as something that's, well, make believe, that's made up. We live in a world of skepticism. We live in a world of materialistic tendencies that wants to see only this life as that which matters and which exists. And of course, we know that every day people are leaving the faith and in search of answers someplace else. I want to counter that by arguing that theology is actually the most practical thing that you could ever study in life. And it's practical, perhaps not exclusively for this life. Okay. Studying theology is certainly not going to help you figure out, how to perform well at your job, or how to handle finances, or how to change the oil in your car, or something literally practical like that. But it's practical in the sense that it applies to the entire essence of who we are. When we start to unpack theology and we see the beautiful truths that it gives us, we learn that in the end, the only thing that really matters is our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And the measure of that relationship is what we call holiness. So that's why I say it's the most practical. It's the highest science, meaning it's the greatest. because it studies the greatest of all things, which is God himself. And I like to say it's unavoidable. It may seem hard to believe right now as sophomores in high school, but I promise you, if this hasn't been the case already in your experience, you're going to find that at some point, even if you're a person that doesn't just like to think about these things because you're like, I don't really know what to make of it all when it comes to theology, to God, his existence, what's right, what's wrong, what my principles are, what my values are, what I stand for. It's unavoidable. At some point, you're going to cross paths with someone who challenges you, who pushes you on these things. Or, as is likely the case for a lot of you, you're going to be in a relationship of your own one day with someone else. And those things are going to be important. How do we raise our kids? What do we teach them? What do we say when they ask, who's God? Right? What do we do there? Okay, those are things that are unavoidable. You're going to have answers. There's just no cop-outs when it comes to these things. So that's just a brief overview of what theology is and why I think it matters. Hopefully that afforded you enough time to write these things down. If not, Mr. Johnson, of course, feel free to stop the video. And I wish I could answer questions, but I can't do that. So I'm trying to anticipate any questions you might have. All right, so with that covered, just a few more things here before I let you get started on your assignment. Who is God? That's kind of the question that we're looking at today. Again, he's the most essential. He's the key player in our drama of salvation history. And we need to understand who he is. It seems like such a silly question. It's only 3 words, who is God? But man, when you really start to slow down and think about it, that's a very difficult thing to answer. But we've kind of taken here the totality of, at least in my study and experience, the different ways of answering that question that have existed throughout time. And we've condensed them down to 3 things. And I want to take you through these. The 3 most common or general summaries that we can give of answering the question, who is God? I want to say real quick, we're going to cover the question about God's existence at some point. So maybe if you're someone who isn't convinced that God exists, or doubts that God exists, or isn't sure, or maybe if you are sure, but you want to be really sure, we're going to cover those things at some point. So we're not trying to assume anything here. The first type of answer to this question that we find classically is that God is something or someone otherworldly. That word otherworldly is kind of synonymous with the word alien, okay? Extraterrestrial literally means out of or outside of the earth, the terra in Latin, okay? Think about the ancient Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, these ancient civilizations that had their own mythology, that had their own worldview about the gods, their interactions with us as human beings. It's all very otherworldly, right? Maybe you're somebody that studied those mythologies before, but if not, I always like to use the example of the movie Hercules. I'm not necessarily a big fan of Disney. I don't know that I've really seen too many Disney things in my day. I hate what Disney did to Star Wars too, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm going to play you a clip. So if you're kind of writing notes, just find a stopping point here for a second, and we'll come back to the slide. But I want to play you a clip just to visually illustrate what I mean here when I say otherworldly. Okay, this is from the Disney movie Hercules. And let me see if I can get out of this and pull it up. And if you've never seen this movie before, that's okay. I just want you to think about what sorts of words come to mind when you see this visualization of who God is, as portrayed, of course, in this cartoon movie of Hercules. Now, we know the Greeks didn't just believe in one God, but many gods, but that's just another part of it. Okay, so think about who is God to the Greeks, to the Romans, the Egyptians, who had this mythology that the gods existed someplace far off, up in the clouds on Mount Olympus. What do you think the implications of those things are? That's what I want you to think about when we play this video. I'm not sure if the sound will work, so Bear with me. At least you got the visuals. Okay. Tell you what, actually, I know the sound's not going to work because I didn't hit share sound. So I'm going to pull the old pump fake on you there. Share sound, haha. And let's go back because the sound just adds another element of that visualization for us. Okay, so think about if this is the first answer. Obviously, again, this is a, you know, whatever, 1990s cartoon portrayal of the Greek and Romans, which doesn't do it justice. But still, think about their answer to who God is, who the gods are. Okay, that's what I want you to think about when we watch this.
Hercules! Behave yourself.
Oh, look at this. Look how cute he is. Ah! Oh, he's strong. Like his dad.
Whoa, excuse me, hot stuff coming through. Excuse me, up one side, Eric.
Why, Hermes, they're lovely.
Yeah, you know, I had Orpheus do the arrangement. Isn't that too nutty? Fabulous party. You know, I haven't seen this much love in a room since Narcissus discovered himself.
Here, keep those away from the baby.
Oh, he won't hurt himself. Let the kid have a little fun.
Okay. Oops. So what are some things that we could come up with? And I'm just assuming here, trying to guess what might be in your mind. But what I see is kind of what I prompted you. Clearly, it's up in the clouds. It's up in the sky somewhere. It looks far off. The gods, you notice the way that's portrayed, actually kind of like this, what they did in Disney there. They don't have human color. Some of them are pink. Some of them are like a really light blue. Some of them are purple. Look at Zeus. Okay, if you don't know Zeus, he's kind of the chief of the gods up there. Okay, I mean, he looks like he does chest day every day, 3 times a day, right? I mean, they don't have the same attributes and characteristics that we do, even though, of course, in the movie and otherwise, they're kind of portrayed to be a little bit anthropomorphic, to look like us as human beings. That sense of otherworldliness is kind of one way of answering that question about who God is. And we see this actually today in a lot of Eastern religions and philosophies. So if you think about Hinduism, Taoism, Jainism, although it doesn't have quite a similar concepts, Buddhism even, as a form of spirituality. Okay, God is someone extremely abstract, not very concrete, certainly out of this world in a certain sense. That's kind of one answer that we see. Even today, people tend to write that off, or not write that off, to have that viewpoint. One way that we see it kind of in not really pop culture, but maybe in your everyday experience is sometimes people who want to be sensitive, I suppose, when someone passes away, but they're not really a religious person. They might say something like, "Oh, you know, he's flying high in the clouds now." You know, we'll say, Bobby passed away. Oh, you know, fly high. You know, he's up in the clouds, and you know, they don't really have this very precise way of understanding God, heaven, hell, all these things. So it's just, I don't know. You know, heaven's somewhere up there. That's kind of what I mean by this. Okay. And that's one way that, again, even today, some people answer that question. Maybe it's the way that you answer that question. That's what we want to start to think about. The second way, classically, is under the letter B there. It's the opposite, really. That God is something or someone very worldly. I don't have any images for you, but the example I use, the ancient Germans, barbarians, used to worship trees as a part of their mythology. It doesn't get more worldly than that. I mean, a tree is just such a grounded, earthly type creature that it really doesn't. I mean, it's just a great example. We think about the pagans of the ancient world. We think about even in our culture today, people who tend to place an emphasis on materialism, on material things, and also who have a viewpoint of the world, as I mentioned before, that all that exists is matter. That's kind of a view of God, of the divine, of the supernatural as something very worldly. Okay. Maybe that's a way that you understand who God is. Okay. That's what we're just trying to think about here. The third way is the Christian response to that question, who is God? And of course, that's the one that we're going to spend the most time looking at. And so, what is the Christian response to who God is? Well, this is not it, by the way, but I want us just to think while we're sitting here looking at this beautiful image. This is an actual image of space from the Hubble telescope. When we think about the world, the vastness of it all, as we see in this image, all the little galaxies and star systems and planets and the nebula and all the different things that exist out there. We have good reason to know from our own experience in our everyday life that things exist for a purpose. When there is something instead of nothing, there tends to be someone or something behind that. In other words, everything that we see in the world has a cause. It has something that it came from. And that's kind of one way from our experience that we can kind of start to see how we can get onto the mental track, if you will, the line of reasoning toward the existence of someone or something that we can call God. That, well, all this that exists, ourselves included, all come from something, come from somewhere. Okay. It's just a helpful place to start, just to think about the beauty, the vastness of the entire world, and the fact that it all exists in an ordered way. It all exists because it came from something. And if we keep winding that clock back and back and back and back to the very beginning point, then where did it all start? So that's one thing that we're going to be looking into over the next couple of weeks, is an answer to that. More formally, and finally, what can we as Christians say about the nature of God? We're not going to fully explore that here today. We're just going to talk about a couple of things. One is, as you write down number 4 here, we primarily, which means the main way that we know of God is through our experience within the created world. Look, it's no secret that you and I are physical beings, okay? You can pinch yourself, especially if you're awake at this point, might be helpful. You could be weighed, you could be measured. You have the 5 senses. Those are the primary way that you interact with the world around you. It's no surprise that you're a physical being. We exist in space and time as human beings, okay, without a doubt. God, of course, for us as Christians, is not something or someone that exists within the world, at least not exclusively. Nor is God someone or something which exists exclusively outside of the world. So if you think back to that slide about the 2 different ways of answering who God is, other than the Christian response, it's kind of like we as Christians are saying, well, yes, a little bit of both, actually. And that's what we're going to unpack during this semester, is how that is. This means, however, that since the only way that we can directly or primarily rather, know God, have knowledge of God is through our experience of him, other than the things that he reveals, is that we don't have an immediate knowledge of him. Now, this all sounds like a bunch of convoluted philosophy stuff, and it is, admittedly. That was my major in college. But I want to give you one example. Imagine you're going to go on a vacation somewhere, even better. Let's spice it up a little bit, okay? Because it's late at night. I'm wired. The cats are going crazy. Let's imagine that you won a trip somewhere, okay? You entered a raffle somewhere and you won a trip. This actually happened to me one time. And we're going to say someplace you've probably never been before, somewhere beautiful. For a time, I've been there a few times, but I used to live in Rome, Italy, for a while when I was in seminary studying to be a priest. And if you've never been to Rome, got to go some point in your life. Beautiful, beautiful city. So let's imagine and assume that you've never been to Rome before and you've won a trip to go. Do you have any immediate or firsthand knowledge of what it's like? Of course not. You've never been there before. Now you can go out and get your Rick Steves guide to Rome. You can go online and look up the best places to visit and the best museums to see and the sightseeing places and get your whole experience all lined up and where you're going to stay. You could even see pictures of the Colosseum, of the Roman Forum, of St. Peter's Basilica, St. Peter's Square. None of it, though, gives you an immediate knowledge of what Rome is like, of what it's like to actually be there on that trip and vacation. Until what? Until you're there. As soon as you step foot off that plane and you take the train from the airport into Rome and you get off, and until you actually experience those things, you don't have an immediate knowledge of them. Okay. They're just abstract things at that point. They're just things that, well, you can have some sense of, but only in relation to things that are actually within your own experience, right? Maybe you have a relative that has been to Rome before, and he or she is just telling you all sorts of, oh, you got to try the gelato at this place, and the best spaghetti that you can get is at this restaurant. But until you experience those things yourself in an immediate way, you don't actually have that type of knowledge. That's what we're saying about our knowledge of God, our experience of God, is all these things that we say about God being our Father, about God being all powerful, about God being, the creator of all things, and God loves us. And those things are all true, but they're only known, they're only true in as much as they exist in relation to our own experience in this life. The beautiful part is that just like that vacation, stepping foot in the streets of Rome, going to the Colosseum, which I used to pass every day, actually twice, sometimes 4 times a day, to and from going to class, seeing those things firsthand, tasting the gelato, tasting the pasta. Just like that experience, once you're there, you have that immediate knowledge and you can fully understand what it's like from that experience standpoint. That is what it will be like in heaven. That is what the saints experience in heaven, is that immediate knowledge of God. And that's what heaven is. So that's a beautiful thing and something great to look forward to. The last thing that we're going to say today about who God is, before I let you tell me who God is we need to know that despite that, we have to understand that there's kind of a limitation to that. Even in heaven, there is a limitation, okay? You can't see all of Rome in a day. In fact, in my experience, you really don't get a whole lot accomplished in one day in Rome because it takes you forever to walk everywhere. You probably get lost. You got to stop to eat. We can't fully understand who God is. Even in that direct experience of him in heaven, God is simply incomprehensible, which means that he cannot be fully understood. This doesn't mean that we can't know God. In fact, we do know lots of things about do know lots of things about who God is, especially those which he's revealed. But it's just his nature. It's a part of his perfect attributes, is that God is incapable of being fully understood. So the last thing I leave us with is, for some of us, that may be confusing. I don't want us to get too far ahead, but the next thing we'll talk about probably Tuesday is that God is, despite this, totally simple. It's like, well, it doesn't sound very simple. We've been talking about all these crazy concepts, and the only thing I've understood so far is Hercules. And I was thinking about when I was a kid watching that. It's like, no. God is purely simple. He is just being itself. Being itself. So why would he be so mysterious? He's not hiding from us. But remember, this is a romance. And God is perfect at romance. And anybody that knows anything authentic about romance is that there's something to being pursued. And God wants us to pursue him. He wants us to go after him. He wants us to look for him. He wants us to be searching for him. And so God veils himself in that mystery. The paradoxical thing about mystery, the last thing I'll say, is that the deeper you go into a mystery, the less you actually understand. And so it is with God. But it's a beautiful thing. All right. All that said, here is what I want for the rest of class today. Hopefully you've got some time. Forgive me for talking too long. If not, that's okay. You've got the weekend. I want you to write a one-page response to the prompt that I have on the screen here. And Mr. Johnson can direct you to the Google Classroom page, which has this assignment on there. Of course, it says on paper, but I've just copied the assignment from this slide onto there so that you can see it in case you need to look at it over the weekend to remind yourself of what you're going to do. Or really, no, none of you will like this. I was going to say, or at 3 a.m. Tuesday morning when you just got done playing Battlefield 5. And it's like, oh yeah, I need to write a paper for Mr. Duckett's class. Nothing stirs the mind about who God is like killing somebody in Battlefield 5, let me tell you. All right, consider your own experience. Maybe you grew up religious, perhaps not. Maybe you grew up in a house where faith was something that you talk about at the dinner table. Maybe not. Maybe you've done a lot of looking into who God is, religion, or perhaps not. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. You know something. There is no way that you've made it through this life this far without knowing or finding out something or hearing something about God. Maybe you have, but today you learned at least a couple things. So tell me, who is God? You have one page, just one side of one page, not front and back, but use the full sheet. Don't skip lines. Don't try any of those tricks. It's only one side of the paper. Okay, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So go ahead and get out that paper. You're done with your notes. If you want to just write it in the next page in your notebook, that's fine. Make sure you tear it out on Tuesday and turn it into Mr. Johnson. If you need some paper, hopefully somebody else has it or Mr. Johnson can provide. Make sure your name's on it, class period at the top, date. Just title it, Who is God? Again, don't skip lines, just write all the way through, one page. It's very, very open-ended. Okay, this is not one of those where there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just asking you from your own experience, who is God? Okay. All right. Very good. So again, hopefully at this point you have a good idea of what to do. I appreciate you listening, especially those in Red 4. This probably isn't a great way to end your Friday, but you've got one little thing to do for me. You've got until Tuesday next week. Make sure you turn it in. And if you don't think you're going to turn it in on time for whatever reason, make sure that you reach out ahead of time to get an extension. You will be penalized for that, but at least you don't get a 0 on it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead and get started. Thank you so much again for your prayers. We're really appreciative. Keep praying for Guinevere. That's my daughter's name, and for my wife. And we hope to be back home this weekend. And I hope to be back in here in probably just a few weeks. So God bless you. And until next time.